Alright guys, time for dinner, and we're on we're on Judges chapter 7. And Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him, rose up early and encamped by the fountain of Harod, so that the camp of Midian was on the north side of them, by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And Jehovah said to Gideon, "The people who are with you are too many for me to give Midian into their hands, lest Israel boast against me, saying, My own hand has saved me. And now proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, Whoever is afraid and trembling, let him turn back and leave Mount Gilead." And 22,000 of the people turned back, while 10,000 remained. And Jehovah said to Gideon, "The people are too many. Bring them down to the water, and let me prove them for you there. And it shall be that of whom I say to you, This one goes with you, let him go with you. And of whomever I say to you, This one does not go with you, let him not go." So he brought the people down to the water, and Jehovah said to Gideon, "Everyone who laps the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, separate him from everyone who bows down on his knees to drink." And the number of those who lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men, and all the rest of the people bowed down on their knees to drink water. And Jehovah said to Gideon, "By the 300 men who lapped I save you, and I shall give Midian into your hand. Let all the people go, each to his place." And the people took food and their shofaro in their hands, and he sent away all the rest of Israel, which each to his tent, and held on to those 300 men. Now the camp of Midian was below him in the valley. And it came to be on that night that Jehovah said to him, "Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down, you and Purah your servant, to the camp. And you shall hear what they say, and after that let your hands be strengthened, and you shall go down against the camp." So he went down with Purah his servant to the edge of the formation of fives who were in the camp. And Midian and Amalek and all the people of the east were lying in the valley as many locusts. And their camels were as numerous as the sand of the seashore. And Gideon came, and see, a man was relating a dream to his companion, and said, "See, I had a dream, and see, a loaf of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian. And it came to a tent and struck, so that it fell and overturned, and the tent fell down." And his companion answered and said, "This is nil, else than the sword of Gideon, son of Joah, a man of Israel. Elohim has given Midian and all the camp into his hand." And it came to be, when Gideon heard this dream related and its interpretation, that he bowed himself down, and he returned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, for Jehovah has given the camp of Midian into your hand." And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put shofaro into the hands of all of them, with empty jars and torches inside the jars. And he said to them, "Watch me, and do likewise, and see. When I come to the edge of the camp, do as I do, and I shall blow with the shofar, and all those with me. Then you shall also blow with the shofar round about all the camp, and say, For Jehovah, and for Gideon." And Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, as they had but newly posted the watch. And they blew with the shofaro, and broke the jars that were in their hands. And the 3 companies blew with the shofaro, and broke the jars, and held the torches in their left hands, and the shofaro in their right hands for blowing. And they cried, "A sword for Jehovah, and for Gidon!" And each stood in his place round about the camp, and all the army ran and cried out and fled. And the 300 blew shofaro, and Jehovah set the sword of each one against the other throughout all the camp. And the army fled to Beth Shittah, toward Sererah, as far as the border of Abel Meholah by Tabath. And the men of Israel were called from Naphtali, and from Asher, and from Manasseh, and pursued Midian. Then Gidon sent messengers throughout all the mountains of Ephraim, saying, "Come down to meet Midian, and capture from them the watering places, as far as Beth Barah and the Yarden." So all the men of Ephraim were called and captured the watering places as far as Beth Barah and the Yarden. And they captured 2 princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb, and killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeeb they killed at the winepress of Zeeb, while they pursued Midian. And they brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gidon beyond the Yarden. And the men of Ephraim said to him, "What is this you have done to us by not calling us when you went to fight with Midian?" And they contended with him sharply. And he said to them, "When I have done as compared with you, are the gleanings of Ephraim not better than the grape harvest of Abiezer? Elohim has given into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb. And what was I able to do as compared with you?" And when he had said that, their rage toward him subsided. And Gidon and 300 men who were with him came to the Yarden, passing over, weary, yet pursuing. And he said to the men of Sukkoth, "Please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are weary, and I am pursuing Zebah and Salmunah, sovereigns of Midian." But the leaders of Sukkoth said, "Are the hands of Zebah and Salmunah now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army?" And Gidon said, "Because of this, when Jehovah has given Zebah and Salmunah into my hand, I shall tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars." And he went up from there to Penuel, and spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered, as the men of Sukkoth had answered him. So he spoke also to the men of Penuel, saying, "When I come back in peace, I shall break down this tower." And Zebah and Salmunah were at Karkor, and their armies with them, about 15,000 men, all who were left of all the army of the people of the east. Now, those who had already fallen were 120,000 men who drew the sword, and Gidon went up by the way of those who dwell in tents, on the east of Zobah and Yogbehah, and he struck the camp, while the camp was at ease. And Zebah and Salmunah fled, and he pursued them, and captured the 2 sovereigns of Midian, Zebah and Salmunah, and shuttered the entire army. And Gidon, son of Joash, returned from battle for the ascent of Heres, and captured a youth of the men of Sukkoth, and questioned him. So the youth wrote down for him the leaders of Sukkoth and its elders, 77 men. And he came to the men of Sukkoth and said, "See, Zebah and Salmunah, about whom you taunted me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Salmunah now in your hand, that we should give bread to your men who are weary?" And he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness, and briars, and with them he taught the men of Sukkoth a lesson. And he broke down the tower of Penuel, and killed the men of the city. And he said to Zebah and Salmunna, How were the men whom you killed at Tabor? So they answered, They were like you. Each one looked like the son of a sovereign. And he said, They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As Jehovah lives, if you had let them live, I would not kill you. And he said to Jether, his firstborn, Rise, kill them. But the youth would not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a youth. Then Zebah and Salmunna said, Rise yourself and fall on us, for as a man is, so is his might. So Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Salmunna, and took the crescent ornaments which were on their camels' necks. So the men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule over us, both you and your son, also your son's sons, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I do not rule over you, nor does my son rule over you. Jehovah does rule over you. And Gideon said to them, I have a request to make of you, that each of you give me the ring from his spoil. For they had rings of gold, because they were Ishmaelites. And they said, We shall certainly give them. And they spread out a garment, and each man threw into it the ring from his spoil. And the weight of the gold rings that he had requested was 1,700 pieces of gold. Besides the crescent ornaments, and the pendants, and the purple robes, which were on the sovereigns of Midian, and besides the chains that were around their camels' necks. And Gideon made it into a shoulder garment, and set it on his city, Ophrah. And all Yisrael went whoring after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his house. Thus Midian was humbled before the children of Yisrael, and they lifted their heads no more, and the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. And Jerubbaal, son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon had 70 sons who were his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and gave him the name Abimelech. And Gideon, son of Joash, died at the good old age, and was buried in the burial site of Joash's father, in Ophrah of the Abiezerites. And it came to be when Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again went whoring after the Baals, and made Baal Berith their mighty one. And the children of Israel did not remember Jehovah their Elohim, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies around about. Nor did they show loving commitment to the house of Jerubbaal, Gideon, according to all the good which he did for Israel. And Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem, to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them, and with all the clan of the house of his mother's father, saying, Please speak in the hearing of all the masters of Shechem, which is better for you, that 70 men, all the sons of Jerubbaal, rule over you, or that one man rule over you? And you shall remember that I am your own flesh and bone. And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the masters of Shechem. And their heart inclined toward Abimelech, for they said, He is our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver from the house of Baal Berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. And he went to his father's house at Ophrah, and killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. And all the masters of Shechem gathered together, and all Beth Milo, and they went and made Abimelech sovereign, beside the terebinth tree at the post that was in Shechem. And they formed Jotham, and he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted his voice and cried out and said to them, Hear me, you masters of Shechem, and let Elohim hear you. The trees went forth to anoint a sovereign over them. And they said to the olive tree, Reign over us. And the olive tree said to them, Shall I leave my oil with which they esteem mighty ones, and men, and go to stay over trees? And the tree said to the fig tree, Come, reign over us. And the fig tree said to them, Shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit, and go to sway over trees? Then the tree said to the vine, Come, reign over us. And the vine said to them, Shall I leave my new wine, which rejoices mighty ones, and men, and go sway over trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, Come, reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, If in truth you anoint me as sovereign over you, come take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. And now, if you have acted in truth and integrity in setting up Abimelech to reign, and if you have acted well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as his hands did to you, for my father fought for you and risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. But you have risen up against my father's house today, and killed his 70 sons on one stone, and set up Abimelech, the son of his female servant, to reign over the masters of Shechem, because he is your brother. And if you have acted in truth and integrity with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the masters of Shechem and Beth Milo. And let fire come from out of And let fire come out from the masters of Shechem and from Beth Milo and devour Abimelech. Then Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer and dwelt there, for fear of Abimelech his brother. And Abimelech governed Israel 3 years. And Elohim sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the masters of Shechem. And the masters of Shechem acted treacherously against Abimelech, in order that the violence done to the sovereign, or to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, might come, and their blood be laid on Abimelech, their brothers, who killed them, and on the masters of Shechem, who strengthened his hands to kill his brothers. And the master of Shechem set men in ambush against him on the tops of the mountains, and they robbed all who passed over by them along the way. And it was reported to Abimelech. And Gaal son of Ebed came with his brothers and passed over to Shechem, and the masters of Shechem put their trust in him, and went out into the fields, and gathered their vineyards, and trod out, and held a feast. And they went into the house of their mighty ones, and ate and drank, and cursed Abimelech. And Gaal son of Ebed said, Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal? And is not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? If only this people were under my hand, then I would remove Abimelech. And he said to Abimelech, Increase your army and come out. And when Zebul, the governor of the city, heard the words of Gaal, son of Ebed, his displeasure burned. And he sent messengers to Abimelech by deceit, saying, See, Gaal, son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem, and see, they are besieging the city against you. And now, get up by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall be, as soon as the sun is up in the morning, then rise early and rush upon the city, and see, when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you shall do to them as your hand finds to do. And Abimelech and all the people who were with him rose up by night and laid in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. Now Gaal, son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance to the city gate, and Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from lying in wait. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, See, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebul said to him, You are seeing the shadows of the mountains like men. And Gaal spoke again and said, See, people are coming down from the high parts of the land. And another company is coming from the diviner's terebinth tree. And Zebul said to him, Now where is your mouth with which you said, Who is Abimelech that we should serve him? And not these the people whom you despised? I beg you, go out and fight them now. So Gaal went out, leading the masters of Shechem, and fought Abimelech. And Abimelech pursued him, and he fled from him, and many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. And Abimelech stayed at Arumah, and Zebul drove out Gaal and his brothers, so they would not dwell in Shechem. And it came to be the next day that the people went out into the field, and they informed Abimelech. And he took his people and divided them into 3 companies, and laid in wait in the field, and looked and saw the people coming out of the city, and he rose against them and struck them. And Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward, and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city, and the other 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the fields and struck them. And Abimelech fought against the city all the day, and captured the city and killed the people who were in it. And he broke down the city and sowed it with salt. And all the masters of the tower of Shechem had heard that, and entered the stronghold of the house of El-Berith. And it was reported to Abimelech that all the masters of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. So Abimelech went up to Mount Salmon, he and all the people who were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand, and cut down a branch from the tree, and took it and laid it on his shoulder. Then he said to the people who were with him, What you have seen me do, hurry, do as I have done. And all the people likewise cut down each one his own branch, and followed Abimelech, and put them under the stronghold, and set the stronghold on fire above them, so that all the men of the tower of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. Abimelech went to Thebez, and he encamped against Thebez and captured it. However, there was a strong tower in the city, and all the men and women and all the masters of the city fled there, and shut themselves in, and went up to the top of the tower. And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it, and approached the door of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on the head of Abimelech and crushed his skull. He then immediately called the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, Draw your sword and kill me, lest men say of me, A woman killed him. And his young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, each one went to his own place. Thus did Elohim repay the evil of Abimelech, which he had done to his father, to kill his 70 brothers. And all the evil of the men of Shechem, Elohim, turned back on their own heads, and the curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came upon them.